Grundig 3299 stereo, 1961–1963. This video is part of a hobby project with the hope that it could provide useful information. If you see or hear something horribly wrong in what I do, it might be helpful if you took the time to let me know. This is an early FM stereo receiver made at the beginning of the 1960s by Grundig. The cabinet takes the space of a horizontal rectangle, very likely thought to be combined with other squared audio components, considering that the radio requires external loudspeakers or amplifier. It seems that to the aesthetics has been given priority over the electronics because the area of the stereo final amplifier tends to be very hot, but in a relatively small space. According to radiomuseum.org, this radio might have an asbestos sheet on the inner top of the cabinet. If you are considering buying or inheriting this radio, you should know that you might find such a thing, and you would bear the responsibility of disposing of it because leaving it in the cabinet would not be safe. Luckily, this particular unit under restoration arrived without such an uncomfortable and unsafe piece. The full story of this unit is not known, however there are traces of the accidents that occurred to it. The label of a servicing center, with a phone number made only of 5 digits, recalls mixed feelings with memories of a long time ago. The most conspicuous accident happened to the expenses of the dial glass. It must have been broken twice, the first time in correspondence with the left hole, the one used by the volume shaft, the second time near the other hole, the one of the tuning shaft. The dial glass is relatively thin, 3 millimeters, and quite wide beyond the width of the chassis. Either a false maneuver while servicing it or a tension caused by a significant temperature variation might have been the reasonable cause of the double accident. The radio mounts a transformer that is not original, and the selenium rectifier bridge has been replaced with a more recent component. The chassis has diffused little traces of corrosion, probably due to the exposure of some acid vapors. The perforated panel that covers the big hole under the chassis was broken, probably just because of a normal pressure applied with one hand while moving the radio in different places. Being a stereo FM and EM radio receiver, its schematic diagram is fairly complex, and it is indispensable for proper servicing. What you see is the original schematic diagram with some extra annotations, but the video does not provide enough detail. The written documentation that is available in the links appearing in the description of this video under the Show More tab includes a better resolution schematic diagram and all the references to find the original published online. Online one may find also information regarding the dial cord arrangement and the alignment procedure. However, for this partial restoration project, no alignment is performed. Following the style that was preceding the usage of printed circuit boards, under the chassis the components are installed on layers. Luckily, the chassis is large enough, and there is still the possibility to reach most of them, even though the procedure is not so comfortable, and a full restoration is probably not advisable. At least the radio appears to be capable of working. Already at the beginning, after fixing an open connection with the power transformer. That is comforting. With patients, all the electrolytic and paper capacitors are replaced. In fact, testing the paper capacitors, they seem to have almost the double of their nominal capacity, which is a symptom of a significant internal electrical leakage. Where possible, in place of the paper capacitors, ceramic ones have been used for a better safety. However, one should keep in mind that ceramic capacitors shift their value with the variation of the temperature, and they might induce microphonic effects. So they would not be acceptable in high-frequency modules unless they are NP0 capacitors, and in units that could be subject to significant vibrations. The chassis is not treated to remove the traces of corrosion, but silicon oil is used everywhere, also to inhibit the development of rust. This radio has a particularly sophisticated dial mechanism. Tuning of FM and EM are distinguished by two different indicators controlled by the same shaft. The problem is that this mechanism relies on friction and spring pressure, while with time it could become loose, making the tuning impossible. A full restoration of this mechanism would require to dismantle the shaft with the friction system, replacing the frictions with some proper material and regulating the right pressure on them. An attempt to do this work without removing the shaft, but with some felt or with some other soft stuff, failed. The friction discs should be relatively hard, as removing and reinstalling the shaft would have implied a significant amount of work, considering also that a full electric restoration would not be possible. The usability has been prioritized, and the two dial movements have been joined using hot glue. Obviously, such a choice is not recommended. Whatever choice one makes in the presence of a similar mechanism, also the lever that pushes the pulleys to one side or to the other, should be tuned properly or moved aside like in this case. The radio arrived with a broken dial glass. Reproducing the dial glass would be complicated, also due to the particular trapezoidal shape. In this case, a test has been made with some black corrugated plastic sheet. The test has been so satisfactory that a more normal dial glass has not been rebuilt. Under the chassis, the cabinet of this radio has a big rectangular hole covered with a thin and densely perforated panel. That panel is very fragile, and applying just a little pressure would break it, with the hazard of getting in touch with high voltage connections under the chassis. This is also the story of the panel of this unit, although we hope that that did not happen when the radio was connected to the mains. Repairing the panel appears to be impractical, but also replacing it with a reproduction does not seem safe enough. Even though the perforated panel served the purpose of allowing the airflow, for security concerns it is replaced with a fully closed panel. Also, this replacement is made of the same corrugated plastic sheet used for the dial glass. While trying to put the chassis back in the cabinet, it appeared that the switching keyboard and the small tone controls were not working correctly because they were not properly aligned nor spaced from the cabinet bottom. It has been necessary to put a spacer of 2 millimeters to tilt the chassis up, using a couple of thick washers like in the way that is visible from these pictures. This radio is fully capable of functioning just with its internal antennas. The radio incorporates a ferrite antenna for medium wave and long wave and an aluminum sheet dipole attached to the internal surface of the cabinet used for the FM band and also for the short wave band. All bands are received fairly well with these internal antennas, including the short wave. This radio requires 2 external loudspeakers. For this purpose, something is built using 2 tuna cans and 2 small loudspeakers recovered from broken Bluetooth devices. Despite the cheap construction, they seem to work fairly well. The radio is tested, starting from the long-wave band, in an apartment that is polluted by a significant amount of electromagnetic noise produced by some electronics from the neighborhood. This noise prevents from receiving almost any signal from the long-wave band and makes it very hard listening to the medium-wave band too. A faint signal emerges from the background noise, but there is no way to isolate it using the tone controls. Medium wave band. Shortwave band. Switching to a simple wire antenna.
The contest giveaway, which welcome to the
A ham radio operator using SSB modulation. This radio is very satisfactory in receiving shortwave stations, even though it only has one shortwave band.
الهاتف ومن ماكينات بيع خطاط وهذا
A lot of stations can be received in the late afternoon and in the evening. FM
Non perdere le tue occasioni importanti.
Sì, mi avete spiegato che... Ma già un po' di tempo.
Complimenti. A Gianluca Fiodori. Si regala un posto. È una...